Hello and welcome to the Brodie Blueprint, the podcast designed to help college students and young professionals navigate their career paths. Each episode, we sit down with industry experts from finance, business, sports, education, and more to uncover their journeys, daily experiences, and lessons they've learned along the way. Whether you're exploring career options, looking for networking advice, or just curious about different industries, this is the place for you. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Hi everybody, welcome back to episode 11 of the Brodie Blueprint. Today I am joined by the head performance coach with the Carolina Ascent, Mr. Austin Tomaz. Austin, thank you very much for coming on the show today, man. How are you doing?
Doing well. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Austin's got a huge resume of work in, performance, sports science, things like that. So I think, any sports science, exercise science fans out there, it's going to be really interesting episodes. Obviously, the role you're in just now, Austin, sounds really interesting. Excited to get into that, but I want to go back to a little bit where you got started. Your Bachelor of Science was in kinesiology and exercise science. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved in this, why it was interesting, and what school was like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So being an athlete pretty much since I can remember, I wanted to be in some level of athletics. I actually was in high school into my first semester of college wanting to be an athletic trainer. So when I was in high school, I worked closely with the high school athletic trainer. I did this small mentorship through him because that's what my plan was, to be an athletic trainer. So it ended up being my first semester of playing college football with the strength conditioning coach. It was like a switch like that. So luckily I was early enough into my schooling where, freshman year, you're just doing the gen eds, things like that. So literally one semester, and it's close enough, athletic training, strength conditioning, where I was able to make that switch. So really enjoyed kind of that more, not relaxed, I wouldn't say, but it wasn't, like I was going to be an engineer or something like that. So it was something I truly did enjoy. Being a painfully average athlete, like I mentioned, playing college football, I played Division III college football. So it's not like I was doing anything amazing. But I understood that I was gaining success as an athlete through strength and conditioning and being under a really solid strength conditioning program, especially in college. My strength coach, Steve Brown, he just retired, but he was incredible. He was pivotal for me, kind of making that switch to the strength conditioning world. But also just like learning under him as an athlete was huge for me. I was able to see, you could be an average player and become a good player, or a good player to be a great player just through, proper training.
Amazing. So this strength coach kind of sounds like something we've had on every episode. Everyone's mentioned sort of a mentorship figure or a mentor they've had. Would you say this was a similar relationship for you at this time of your college life? Is this kind of a mentor that really gave you a passion, something?
I would say it took until I was an upperclassman. Me and him actually kind of butted heads freshman year, sophomore year. And it was like an ego thing. I thought I knew plenty because I was a kinesiology major. Until I really started getting deeper into my coursework is when I was like, okay, maybe this guy does know what he's doing. But yeah, I've still mentioned that to interns that I've led or coworkers, that he was kind of the first one to open my eyes to the field of strength conditioning, where, in high school, I had coaches that we did lifting and we did training. But he was probably one of the smarter people that I've worked under or worked with. So yeah, being able as an athlete, but then also kind of during like our practicum, our senior year, was huge growth for me.
Amazing. And what was it like for you getting to see that from the other side? You talked about leading interns yourself there. What was it like leading interns for you?
I love it. I'm really passionate about mentorship and trying to grow the minds of young strength conditioning professionals. I'm one of many strength coaches that are frustrated with things. Obviously you'll hear this: low pay, long hours, things like that. But my thought process with that is, if you're not going to try and make change, make it better for those that are coming behind you, then what are you doing? So I absolutely love working with either interns or grad assistants. At my last position at Grand Canyon University, I was actually an adjunct professor for exercise science program as well. So I love to teach, and I love to just kind of share experiences, to kind of let people know. I think a lot of times, and I was the same way as a freshman, sophomore, thinking that, oh, it's super glamorous. You're going to work with these high profile athletes and it's super fun. And, you get to wear cool gear all the time. But kind of showing them the side of strength conditioning where, yeah, it's fun and enjoyable, but there is a lot behind the scenes that people are unaware of. And we're not just, dumb meatheads. Well, most of us, let's just say most of us aren't just dumb meatheads.
Yeah, of course.
So I love to kind of show that to the next generation of professionals.
Amazing, yeah. And obviously, when we get into your career, I want to talk about the pros and cons. So even just from reading your LinkedIn, I see there's a few things with the CEU policy maybe you don't agree with. So I do want to touch on that as well. Beforehand, obviously, internships are something a lot of our listeners are very interested in. You got to intern with TCU, who are quite a large school, a bigger D1 program. How did you go about getting that internship, and what was it like being in that kind of school and being in that kind of athletic program?
How I went about it. So as I was finishing up my undergrad, our professors were giving us resources, kind of where to find either postings or the contact information of people that are leading internships. So there's a couple different sites that I will show to either the interns or the GAs. That's not even just for internships, but positions. The CSCCA has a part of their website that'll show either part-time or internship positions, full-time positions, things like that. But for this one, if I remember correctly, all I did was a Google search to, pretty much every Power 5, I guess it's now Power 4, but at the time Power 5 school, looked up their strength and conditioning program. And a lot of the schools on their site will have like, hey, internships, email this person. It worked out for me. So Zach Dakin, who's now top dog at TCU, still working with baseball, but he's, as far as I know, leading the Olympic side. He roomed with somebody that actually went to the same school as me, obviously at different times. But already having that connection really, really helped. So I remember he called me my senior year when I was trying to secure an internship, and was a super informal call. And I was like, okay, so what are the next steps? He's like, hey, well, you have the job. Just basically he reached out to his former roommate who knew the strength coach that I was discussing, Steve Brown. And they're like, yeah, let's give this kid a shot. Walking into that facility, especially being Division III, first day of that internship, walking into a Power 5, fairly good program of football, but also the other sports, it was a little overwhelming, honestly, just to see the resource difference. And that was a really cool experience for me, thinking I was big time. I think, and some of the questions that you had sent me, I think that almost made me think I was a little too big for my britches type thing. Thinking like, oh, wow, I secured this internship. But it was an amazing experience. It really did help kind of secure the trajectory of future positions.
Was it quite a hands-on experience? Were you doing, quite meaningful work and really getting to learn there?
Absolutely. A lot of it was explained as a trade-off where, yeah, of course, as an intern, you're doing the not sexy work. We're having to clean benches, set up the bands at each rack, set up different stations. But if, that's kind of the trade-off where you get to learn from somebody like Zach Dakin and the other coaches that are on staff if you end up doing a good job. But yeah, I remember day one in, I did it during the summer. So the football team was in, and you got 100 Division I football players out there, and it's absolutely intimidating, but it's like, hey, you're out there and do, coach essentially, which is tough when you're going up to a 6'4" defensive lineman, as I'm a 22-year-old kid that has no experience. But it was a good mix of kind of throwing us into the fire, but also having the mentorship as we went along to really grow and understand why we're doing certain things in the weight room. So I, again, every single step that I took really, elevated me almost exponentially, of just kind of taking what I already knew, but then like connecting data points. So I try to explain that to my interns, like, we're going to give a bunch of data points. You're going to be from your undergrad, from your own personal reading, the videos that you watch, just conversation. But now let's start making those connections. Like, oh, I remember this from senior year when we were learning this, and now it makes a connection.
Amazing. No, it sounds like a really great experience. Obviously, I can only imagine what walking into a D1 weight room's like. So it sounds like it would be certainly intimidating. Obviously, you've picked up now experience NCAA D3, intern D1. You then ticked them off the list and came to the NAIA, where you were at Weber briefly. What was the motivation, and why did you want to come back and do your MBA in sports admin?
Well, as I was finishing up my internship, I still didn't really know how the industry worked. So knowing it's like, okay, I want to be a full-time strength conditioning coach in the collegiate level, but I didn't really know the steps. So it was at the end of the internship when I was talking with Coach Dakin and just try to figure out, it's like, okay, if I'm looking for a grad assistantship position, which essentially is the next step, you're going to do an intern or two, become a GA, and then once you have your master's degree, you can get a full-time gig, either private sector, professional, collegiate, whatever. But I was like, do I need to find a program that has a master's in either exercise science or kinesiology? And what he said to me is, it's essentially, yeah, if you can, but it's not required. It's essentially you going to a university, working, and is getting a master's degree, but what you're gaining from that is the experience of hopefully running teams, leading programs, things like that. So when I was applying, looking at same as the internship, was applying everywhere that had a grad assistantship. And it came down to how much money, what's the smallest amount of money I'm going to lose, essentially, because the same way that internships are going to be unpaid almost across the board, grad assistantships, you will get a very, very small stipend, if that. So a big factor was, one, I knew I was going to be leading teams, where there are some grad assistantship programs where all you are is an assistant, like a lead assistant, where, hey, I'm going to help with the baseball team, I'm going to help with the football team. I wanted to dive in and be leading programs. So that was very, very intriguing. That probably was number one, but also full tuition waiver, housing, and a stipend. It was like, okay, if I'm coming here for the next 2 years, I don't want to have to take a loan out. I don't want to have to be stressed financially. It's like, okay, you're giving me free housing, and I think we had free breakfast, if I remember. And I was like, okay, lead teams and not go completely into debt. Go. And Florida was great.
Of course.
So that was helpful. I think I had an offer, and I'm a Midwest guy, so I'm from Wisconsin, so I can make fun of the Midwest. But I'm pretty sure it was a school in Ohio, and it was pretty similar of everything else. But then I was like, okay, if I'm going to compare one more layer, it's like, do I want to spend time in Florida or spend time in Ohio? And I would have said the same thing if it was Wisconsin. Just I've dealt with the weather in the Midwest, and obviously Florida is a destination for a lot of people. So that kind of wrapped up the decision for me.
I hear that. I spent my first 3 years at college in southeastern Kentucky, so there's a big difference. Living in Florida is a lot nicer than living up there, so I can definitely see how that swayed your mind. So what teams were you working with directly while you were at Weber? Did you work across the board, or was there some specific teams you worked with?
So I started off and I was leading men's basketball and women's soccer. And then as a GA, we essentially had to assist whenever we had time. So all of the GAs, we assisted with football. I also assisted with track and field, men's lacrosse. I think those are the main ones. So again, as a GA, so obviously NAIA, it's not like I was working with a Division I basketball program, but having men's basketball experience, but then also women's soccer, which are typically some more premier sports at other universities. To be able to get the opportunity to lead those teams as a grad assistant was huge for me. And not to talk poorly about the other sports you'd be working with, but there are times where, hey, we're going to hire this kid as a GA, and he or she is just going to get kind of the leftover teams, which might sound bad to say. But I was very fortunate to work with two premier, but really diversified myself. So I get a field sport, I get a female sport, but then a court sport and a male sport. And then eventually, when it was my boss at the time, when he left, I actually took over baseball as well. So for my final year and a half there, I was working those three primarily, and then assisting as needed.
Amazing. That's, again, it sounds like, in every kind of bit of experience you had as a student, you got a really quite holistic, wide view of, what kind of sports you've been working in. So, I mean, it sounds like great experience for you. We want to kind of not rush over to the Carolina Ascent. It sounds really interesting what you're doing now, but I want to talk about some of the roles you had in between then. What was it like? What was your journey like from leaving Weber to getting to where you are now? And touch on some of the roles that you've had.
Yeah, for sure. So when I was at Weber, like I said, started there as a grad assistant, and about a year in, one of the full-time employees left. So I was able to step into that role. And then a few months later, the head strength coach left. So was able to step into that role shortly after. So it was about a year and a half, and they changed the master's program. They shortened it. So I was there for a year and a half instead of that full 2 year. And I finished up the year in December as now the head strength coach, but also just finished my master's. So it was, from here bouncing up to top guy almost in, like I said, 16 to 18 months. So that was a little overwhelming, but again, kind of that throwing me into the fire really helped growth. Was there for another year or so. And then it was just, time to start looking, time for some change, kind of trying to elevate my career. So applied and got the men's soccer position at Grand Canyon University. And that was awesome. I feel like now, obviously with the Ascent as well, I've kind of leaned into working with soccer athletes. I never played soccer, never even watched soccer. I still really don't watch soccer other than my team when I'm at their games. But in terms of strength and conditioning, it's kind of like a puzzle for me, where you have to have some of the most fit athletes, but you also can't be slow. You can't, you have to be explosive. You have to be fast. They're running 8 to 10 miles a game sometimes. So it's like, how do we manage the load of them for the next week's training? So it's like putting a puzzle together. Anyway, going back to the Grand Canyon position. So started there, kind of went to the bottom of the totem pole. So was at the top in an NAI school, and then just became kind of an entry-level position at Grand Canyon. Similarly to other spots in my career, it's kind of been like a next man up mentality where other people have left, and I've gotten the opportunity to kind of step up into that role, get promoted, things like that. And that's when I started teaching. So like I mentioned before, my last year and a half at Grand Canyon, I was an adjunct professor as well, but also leading the internship. And then of course, working with the men's soccer team. So really, really loved that experience as well. I still reach out to a lot of the people that I worked with there. Zach Farrell was my boss. And in terms of how to manage upwards, so my position managing up to either an athletic director or a head sport coach, or like right now, the general manager, like kind of the front office, he taught me really, really strong qualities of how to manage upwards instead of just managing downward. So he saw that, I've led interns, I've worked with grad assistants, I've been able to teach those that are below me or equal with me. He's like, but here are steps to take to like chat with, even him. It was like, hey, here's how you would have a conversation with your direct boss, but then those higher up. And I really do believe that is what helped or gave me the qualities to then move into a position where I am the head performance coach, but my conversations are with general managers, head sport coaches. I'm having to not convince, but kind of portray like, hey, this is why I need this, this, and this. And that isn't something that I did very well in the past. Like I mentioned, when I was at Weber, I was kind of overwhelmed being in that head position. I didn't know how to talk to athletic directors. I didn't know how to leverage myself and my staff to kind of get what you want. And he did a really good job kind of teaching me that side of things. So it's been an amazing journey of like different kind of milestones that I've learned at each step, where of course I have to learn the strength conditioning, the X's and O's, the programming of that, speed, lifting, stuff like that. But it's kind of those soft skills as a professional that he definitely elevated my abilities.
I think it sounds like those soft skills are obviously something you wouldn't really associate with going into the kind of the job that you work in. We've got a strength coach at Weber still now, obviously, and it's all kind of strength, lifting, recovery, things like that. And that's kind of, for me, someone who's not studying kinesiology and exercise science, I would never assume that you guys have to kind of figure out how to talk to assistant directors, figure out how to talk to directors above you. So it's a really interesting point, and that's something, again, you have to learn, and it allowed you to feel more comfortable where you are now. On the topic of where you are now with the Ascent, obviously playing in the Super League, I'm a big soccer guy, so I'm really interested to kind of hear what you've got to talk about here. Give us a little bit of information about kind of exactly what you do, maybe a day in the life of game days, recovery days, and just a little bit of information about the Ascent as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So typical day, it'll be a staff meeting with the technical staff, then also the medical and performance staff. We're going over the loading for the day. So we're wearing our GPS metrics, kind of where we want to be the day based on kind of the match minus day. So, hey, it's a match -4. We're going to have an off day on match -2. This is where our loading should be throughout the week. So we have kind of an ebb and flow there. And then, of course, any red or yellow flags where the medical staff will present like, hey, yesterday somebody got a knock. They're going to be determined, and then we'll discuss any changes I have to make in terms of their lifting or in terms of training. After the staff meeting, pre-training, I have 2 lifting groups. One of them is the return to play lifting group. So anybody that isn't a full green light, if they're either limited in minutes or still, coming off of surgery, things like that. And then the first morning lifting group, which is fully healthy athletes, they just prefer to lift pre-training. Within that, the athletes will come in that if they're not lifting, they're doing their activation or their readiness testing. So I'm managing, we have like a wellness survey, but then they're also jumping on the force plates. So that gives me a readiness score and a wellness score. And I communicate that with the medical staff. If they're, again, any yellow, red flags, any changes I have to make. If somebody comes in and their readiness score is super, super low, and we're supposed to be hitting a strength-based lift, I'll modify volumes or intensities. From there, they have a pre-training meeting, and that's typically when I'll go set up my warm-up and my speed drills, depending on the day. Essentially, based on the match minus day, will be a different theme of a warm-up. So I'm trying to kind of, we call it micro-dosing the stimulus, where some days we're doing top-end speed, some days we're doing change of direction, some days we're doing extensive plyos, what have you, based on whichever day of the week to stresses on the body. Through training, so obviously, like I said, I'll set that up, and then we start our training. I'll do the warm-up, do the speed work, and then when training is going on, I'm looking at our live GPS units. So we have a receiver that pretty much just spits it out on the computer as they go. Their meterage increases for total distance, high-speed running, XLs, decels, things like that. And it's not like I'm just staring at the computer, but every drill or every break, I'll be doing a check-in just to make sure we're on track. Sometimes I'm having to go into the coaches like, hey, instead of 4 sets of 3 minutes, can we cut this down to 4 sets of 2.5 minutes, just so we're not going too far over. After that will be a quick lunch. Sometimes I'm even finishing my lunch when the first lift group comes in, and then I'll have 1 to 2 lift groups depending on the day. After those lift swirls, where I'm downloading the data, scrubbing the data, and then make the report, send it to the coaches with my insights, and then we discuss it either that afternoon or the following morning, like, hey, we went a little bit over today, or yesterday, so we have to balance it out today just to make sure we're on the right track for like the weekly total. And then we finish up, me and the medical staff, our physical therapist and athletic trainer. We just kind of do a full athlete rundowns, like were there any yellow or red flags? Did we have to make any modifications, things like that? And then I go home and we repeat it the next day.
Amazing. So are you in a position where when it comes to team selection for the coaches, managers, whatever, do they consult you on, how ready a player is, how fit a player is? Is this something is this a conversation you're involved in?
Yes. And it's mainly the red flags where we show up,
Okay.
Where if, for example, their wellness score is a standard deviation below their average, and then their readiness score also standard deviation below their average, and it's like we start a conversation, be like, hey, what's going on? It's like, oh, I don't feel good, I'm starting to get sick, or I didn't sleep well. That red flag is kind of sent off to the coach. Be like, hey, just so you know, not saying we're necessarily going to pull somebody, because sometimes it's, this is athletics. Sometimes, oh, you have a cold, you're still gonna have to train, but just so that they have that information. I try to explain it as I am receiving data and I'm trying to find relationships. Okay. I give my insight and then let those that are responsible take ownership of that. So it's like, hey, I found a relationship. They have poor wellness, poor readiness. Subjectively, they don't feel well. Now do with that what you will, because like I said, sometimes, hey, this is a 90-minute player and we're 2 days out from a match. We can't just not practice, but let's modify, let's understand where we are. So it's a lot of trying to search and find those relationships to see if the proper channels can make a decision off of it.
Amazing, great. And then when it comes to a match day, are you involved? Are you still taking warm-ups during, pre-game, or do you kind of step back then?
Yeah, we'll do the pre-game warm-up before they get into, the technical stuff. On game day, I actually shorten that's probably the shortest warm-up on my end of the week. Because I understand they're going to have another 40 to 45 minutes where they're getting touches on the ball, shooting, doing their positional drills. So that usually about 6 to 8 minutes. Always finish before we go into the locker room beforehand. We'll hit some type of high speed running. I'll do like a wicket drill, something like that, just so their body's exposed to something higher speed. And then of course the reserves mid game, or if they're called like, hey, we got to warm up player A, player B, they're going to be coming on in about 5 minutes. I'll take them to the corner and get them prepped just to head out. But then other than that, game day is honestly probably my easiest day of the week.
Your quietest days. That's funny. Cool. And then, so I just wanted to hear an insight. Obviously, the kind of stuff you're talking about during your weeks, during, your match day -4 and stuff. You guys are really busy all the way up until match days. What are your recovery days like? These are obviously high performance athletes who, soccer's a very kind of intense sport for 90 minutes. What do your recovery days look like?
If we are home, the next day, like our match day +1, we will have a session for the low to no minute players. And if scheduling allows, I will take the high minute players. So they'll go through the warm up and maybe do some rondos, things like that, but then they're done. We've gotten into a decent routine at some times of the year where schedule allows, where I'll take them in and I call it just a rebound session, where we head into the weight room. Trying to get some type of aerobic flush just to help stimulate recovery. I understand if they played 70 to 90 minutes, I understand their body probably doesn't feel great. So we're trying to stimulate recovery without adding any additional stress. So we'll hit some type of upper body strength lift, trying to regain range of motion in the hips or ankles, wherever they're feeling stiff. We'll do a lot of like loaded range of motion. That's very, very small volume, just so that we're not taxing them any further. And then, which is probably their favorite part, I call it corpse pose. I guess this probably not super PC anymore, but they lay on the ground, their feet elevated on a bench, and sometimes I'll just put some relaxing music on, and it's like, just focus on your breathing. So it's like, we want to stimulate recovery. I don't like passive recovery. I think to recover, you still have to do something. Blood flow is going to be probably one of the better things you can do for recovery. So just, sitting on the couch all day isn't going to be the best thing for you. But it's like, hey, if you can give me 20 minutes moving, get some type of strength stimulus, which has been shown, stimulating strength with the CNS has been shown to stimulate recovery, but not hitting the legs. Get some blood flow, and then focus on our breathing to kind of switch back into the parasympathetic nervous system. Hopefully, and it seems to have worked relatively well, is by the first re-entry training day for the next following week, they do feel a little bit fresher.
Right. And that's an amazing insight into what you do, and how you can work with kind of really high performance athletes and teams. I want as well, before we run out of time, I want to touch on the CSCS and the SCCC licenses that you have. Obviously, these things don't really mean a whole lot to me. The CEU, I don't know what that is really, but I see it's something you post on LinkedIn a lot, and I'm really excited to hear what these licenses are and why you did them. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about them as well, please.
Yeah. So the first one I got was through the National Strength Conditioning Association. That's the CSCS. That's essentially the baseline certification across the board. I got that in 2016. So after I finished up my internship at TCU, I came back home for a semester, and I took that in 2016. And then last 2025. So last spring of 2024, the CSCCA, which is the Collegiate Strength Conditioning Coaches Association, I took that certification test. That's the SCCC, so Strength Conditioning Coach Certified. I was interested in that. My boss at Grand Canyon University, he's about to become a master strength coach through the CSCCA, which I believe is 12 years as a SCCC. And I'm not one to just try to get more letters behind my name, but I do appreciate the CSCCA organization. And I think having it more directed towards collegiate strength and conditioning, where the NSCA is great. Obviously, it's a huge governing body for strength conditioning coaches, but it's very general, where the collegiate kind of brings it down into collegiate strength conditioning coaches. So I got that in 2024. So a CEU, what you saw in my post, a continuing education unit to make sure that you maintain your certification. It's like a 3-year reporting period, and you need to get a certain amount of continuing education units. And that could be going to conferences, going to clinics, reading articles, taking quizzes, what have you. So the post that you saw, I took the CSCCA. You take the test at the conference. It's the first day of the conference. The next day the conference actually starts with the talks and the presentations, things like that. I was under the impression that conference would count towards my CEUs. Well, I got an email saying, "Oh, you still have a certain amount of CEUs." I was like, "Well, didn't I just go to that conference? Like, why is this not filled?" It's like, "Oh, well, technically you weren't certified at the time you went to the conference." So I was like, "Gosh, I'm paying, $300 to take the test, $300 for entry into this conference, and I can't even get the CEUs for it." Man. Which I think is just silly. And like I said in the post, you'd think as an organization that is trying to strive and help strength conditioning professionals, I feel like that could be
kind of give you a hand in getting those units instead of how bizarre, man. Well, that's cool.
I think go ahead.
Sorry. No, go on. I was going to interrupt you, so please go on.
No, you're good. Just to talk about organizations in general, I think it's important to have a checks and balances system. Not saying if you have these certifications, you're going to be a good strength coach, but it's flipped. If you're going to be a good strength coach, you need to have some type of certification, like a nationally accredited certification. So it's at least in the step in the right direction. They do a better job. You can get some personal training certifications in a weekend online. You just take a test online and you get some printout. So they do a better job. That this is a organization that does a checks and balances with a very long exam that you do have to study for. There's plenty of people that will not pass it the first time because it's not just a gimme. So yes, that post seemed like I was frustrated, and I am or was, but both organizations do a very good job of at least making a governing body to make sure that people are on the right track to be successful.
No, fingers crossed. Hopefully somebody from the CEU saw your post and maybe a little bit of common sense can come forward and maybe stop that from happening again in the future. But what does the future look like for you, Austin? Obviously you talk about somebody that continually wants to grow. You've had a lot of stepping stones where you continually look for growth. What's the future like for you? Is there any other roles you look to gain?
I really do enjoy the collegiate setting. I think I got out of the college setting at a good time just because the way I think the NIL talk, and that's so oversaturated now to talk about that, but it's gone too far one way and it's going to go too far the other way. And somewhere along the line, it's going to balance out. And I think it will be a good thing for collegiate athletes. It's just, it would be very, very tough to, 90% of the college jobs you're going to be making substantially less than some of the athletes will be making through NIL. But I do like that age group. I think there's a lot of growth that can happen. Working at Grand Canyon, I can not only just be a coach to the young men that I worked with, but kind of be either like a big brother figure, a father figure. It's like, hey, we can teach you about life as well. Instead of, it's not transactional. Yes, I want you to get stronger, faster, better at your sport, but it's like, I want to see you graduate. I want to see you be, good people in society. So I think eventually I would like to get back, be a director at a collegiate, in a collegiate setting. But I'm very happy with it's kind of a breath of fresh air being in the professional setting, just from day one. And this is a lot to do with from the ownership, and then from our general manager, head coach. They make it a very professional feel. And that's something that I haven't had before, working with amateur or semi-pro, where this, it is a very professional feel, and I do enjoy it. So I'm in no rush to leave. I really do. Like I said, I like working with soccer as well. I don't think I would work with any other professional sport other than soccer. But I would say somewhere down the line, I think I'll get back into the college setting, be a director somewhere, and see if, I'm leading one team, where it's like I'm going to be overseeing multiple teams. And that's appealing to me, to kind of see if I can build a system that can make multiple sports teams successful.
Amazing. That's a really great reason to work back in college sport. I think a lot of college coaches are kind of quite ruthless in terms of performance and, being the best at your sport, as opposed to developing you as a person as well. So it's nice to hear that come from somebody that wants to work back in college sport. I did say we were drawn to a close. I do have one more question for you. They keep coming up from what you're saying. NIL being a huge one, what are some other differences you've picked up between working with college sports and working with professional?
The attitudes.
Wow, okay.
Where and again, this is the first team that I've worked with in the professional world, but I have never, or let's just say seldomly, received pushback. It's a lot of, okay, what can I do to improve? And how is this going to help me improve? Where there have been times in the college setting that I get pushback from athletes, I get pushback from sport coaches of like, hey, I don't think that this is the best for the athletes. Where here, the general manager, he's hiring somebody that is the professional in their field. The very first call that I had with him, he said, "You're the professional in performance. I don't want to have to micromanage. I'm not the professional in performance. So if you're coming in here, it's going to be your show." And I think that humble approach, as somebody that is managing a lot of people, as the kids say, like, let them cook. It's like, hey, I'm going to hire you because you're the best candidate. Now go cook. And I think that's been a huge thing. I've never had the head coach come in and like check to see what we're doing. It's like, oh, I don't know if we should be doing that lift or that speed work. It's like, hey, can I get extra 5 minutes on the warm up because we're going to do additional speed? He's like, yeah, absolutely. So he truly believes that what I'm doing is the best for the team, and that trickles down to the athletes. I think that's been the biggest thing. And that's, again, not saying that every professional organization is going to be like that. Yeah. But a lot of the athletes are doing everything they can to improve, where a lot of times I saw in the college world, it's like they want to live the college life and they just so happen to be a student athlete. Yeah. Amazing. No, Austin, thank you so much for all your insight and wisdom. I'm going to call in our last little section here, if there's people listening who want to work in a similar field as you, they're exercise science majors, what are a couple of pieces of advice you'd have for them as they start their careers? Don't be too big for certain jobs. I mentioned, during my internship, I learned a ton, but I always think back, it's like, I could have been better. If somebody gives you the task of wiping down benches, be the best at wiping down benches. and try to learn. Like I mentioned, the data points, learn on your own. Like, of course, you're going to learn things through experience, but read books, watch videos, listen to podcasts. There's always somebody who doesn't know something that you know. I fell into a trap of only wanting to listen to or read articles or books by people that I agreed with. And since I have tried to shift where it's like, I don't really agree with certain things, but it's like, I'm going to find one thing that I do agree with, or be like, oh, that's an interesting insight. Now I can take that. Where instead of like, oh, if I read a book of somebody that I agree with, it's like, oh, wow, all this is great. It's like, it doesn't really challenge your mind. Final thing, and this is across all industries, is be a problem identifier, but also be a problem solver. There are way too many problem identifiers out there that aren't also problem solvers. Where I think, like, if I started a position and I was managing a gas station tomorrow, I have no experience doing that, but I would be able to identify problems and then work to solve problems. I think that's a super invaluable skill that a lot of young interns or grad assistants I've seen in the past just not have. They need to be handheld a lot. So it's kind of just being a self-starter. I think across all industries, you're a self-starter and a problem solver, you're going to climb the ladder. I think that's why, you know, that next man up, where I was able to kind of get promoted just because I was the best at what I was currently doing. I think that was a main reason I was able to step into roles that were a little bit higher than I probably was ready for, but that helped me, you know, step into that role, and I had to grow, you know, trial by fire.
Amazing. Austin, you've given us a lot of great knowledge and wisdom, and obviously that's some brilliant advice you've ended with. Thank you very much for taking the time of your day to come on.
Absolutely. Appreciate you, Jack.
Guys, new episodes every Wednesday. Look for Instagram and TikTok for other updates, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you again.
Thanks.
Well, that's all for today, folks. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and were also able to gain some valuable insight into a potential career. Please head over to Instagram and TikTok and follow us. That's the Brodie Blueprint. And also don't forget to like and subscribe on YouTube as well. If you guys have any guests that you want to see on the podcast, or any industries that you want to see guests appear from, please let us know. Until next time, guys. See you later.